All right, in our last video, we talked about spiritual growth and we answered two questions, which are, what do we believe about spiritual growth and how do we talk about spiritual growth? In this video, I want to talk about what's our strategy to help people grow spiritually and who is responsible for spiritual growth. Our strategy to help people grow spiritually is this. We want people to do two things: take a step and fully engage. There are lots of steps that they can take, and we want them to do that for their benefit, not for ours, for their growth. We want them to be able to take steps like getting baptized or joining a group, reading their Bible, serving, because what happens, as we've seen, when they take a step, their faith takes off. So here are 5 really strategic steps that people can take right here at Brazos Fellowship to be able to grow spiritually. Number 1, attend weekend services. Number 2, connect in a group. Number 3, serve on a team. 4, prioritize percentage giving. And number 5, invest and invite. Here's what those 5 steps look like. Number 1, attend weekend services. Make it a priority to consistently attend the weekend services in person or online. Gathering with believers to worship and hear God's word will help you and encourage you in your faith. As we worship together through music, we have the opportunity to express our love to God and to open up our hearts to God. And every one of Pastor Will's messages is designed to teach principles from Scripture and give you practical steps to apply God's wisdom in your daily life. Second, connect in a group. Make sure that you are prioritizing relationships, that you are being known, that you are growing together with a group of people. And if you don't have a community of people challenging you to grow, we want to help you find it and be a part of it. Third, serve on a team. Find a ministry team to be able to serve with. And a couple of things are going to happen. Not only will you be better connected to that group of people, but something's going to happen inside of you. There's going to be a new hunger that's going to come alive inside of you as you get off the sideline and onto the field. As you begin to make a difference in the lives of others, your faith is going to grow. As you begin to see a group of middle school students connect to each other, or preschoolers talk about Jesus for the first time, or you greet somebody at the door who hasn't been to church in years, and then you see them come back the next week, or maybe as you lead a small group, your faith is going to grow. Fourth, prioritize percentage giving. Now, when we choose to give, and specifically when we choose to give first, here's what happens. It's like a physical demonstration of a spiritual reality. It's physically demonstrating that we're not going first. It's physically demonstrating that we love other people. It's physically demonstrating that God comes first and His priorities come before our own consumption. And it's a way of saying, God, I trust you with everything. When we choose to give, specifically to give financially, it actually releases growth in other areas because we often realize that that stuff had a grip on us. And the 5th thing we can do is invest and invite. We invest in the people around us. We serve them. We love them. We help them. And then we invite them to take next steps. Maybe it's inviting them to church. Maybe it's inviting them into community. But whatever it is, when you see someone that you genuinely care for and you've been investing in, you see them take a step of faith, your faith is going to grow. These 5 areas, these 5 places we lean into, they're not for the church, they're for you. They're for you and your faith as you look to be able to grow spiritually. So here's what we do strategically. We create easy opportunities for people to take next steps and fully engage in those 5 areas. Okay, that's our strategy for how we strategically make it easy for people to grow. Now let's talk about who is responsible for it. Who is responsible for a person's spiritual growth? It's an amazingly important question. Who is responsible for your growth? It's important because what I've discovered in my own life is that when I answer the question correctly, I've experienced spiritual growth. And the opposite is true also. When I've answered it incorrectly, I've stalled out in my spiritual growth. So one of the things I want to talk about is that the church and the pastor is not responsible for your spiritual growth. However, the church does want to be a partner in your spiritual growth. The church wants to be able to create steps for you to be able to lean into, not to force it, not to demand it, not to try and convince you, but to be available when you're ready, when God is prompting, to be able to take steps of faith. And if you're in a small group, your group is not responsible for your spiritual growth. Or if you have a community of friends who walk along beside you in your spiritual journey, they are not responsible for your growth. As great as they are and as helpful as it is to have a group of people spurring us on, they are ultimately not responsible. Hopefully in your group, you'll experience accountability and belonging and care, and they'll encourage you and they'll challenge you and support you in your growth, but your group is not responsible for your spiritual growth. The truth of spiritual growth is that you are responsible for your spiritual growth, and I'm responsible for my spiritual growth. And as soon as I can embrace this, and as soon as you embrace this truth that we are all individually responsible for our own spiritual growth, then we can begin to own our spiritual growth. So I want to get really practical. How do we do that for ourselves? How do we prioritize and own spiritual growth for ourselves? Here's how we believe we do it, through 5 faith catalysts. We keep hearing these 5 things over and over that God consistently uses to grow our faith. So let's talk about them. I'll list all 5 of them, and then we're going to go back and talk about them individually. Here they are. Number 1, practical teaching. 2, private disciplines. Number 3, providential relationships. Number 4, personal ministry. And number 5, pivotal circumstances. The first faith catalyst is practical teaching. That is teaching that helps us apply what we're learning about how to love God, how to be in community, and how to influence others. A great example of practical teaching is our weekend messages right here at Brazos Fellowship. Other examples are maybe a great book that points you to Jesus and a growing relationship with Him, or a podcast you listen to that helps you discover how your faith and your life work together. So you have to ask yourself, are you putting yourself in a position where you're owning your faith by participating in, by listening to, and by applying practical biblical teaching? The second faith catalyst is private disciplines. Now, there are a whole bunch of things that you can do privately to be able to connect with God relationally. There are things that we hear in people's stories. People talk about Bible study and prayer, about giving generously, about having a quiet time with God, or engaging in worship. Private disciplines are powerful and effective ways for us to connect with God. But please hear me, they are not a way that we try to chase God's approval. You already have God's approval. When you put your faith in Jesus, He has already called you His son or His daughter. But private disciplines are a great way for us to be able to own our faith, to own our spiritual growth, and to know God better and love Him more. And we've seen over and over that it's something God uses to grow our faith. The third faith catalyst is this: providential relationships. In almost every story that we hear people talk about other people. God uses other people in our lives to come along beside us, to cheer us on as we take steps, to support us and challenge us when we take steps that are maybe backwards or when we make mistakes, and to help us see Him and other people in new ways. I think about my friend Jacob. Over the past 25 years, God has used my friendship with Jacob over and over and over to grow my faith. And I would imagine God has providentially put people in your life specifically to help you grow spiritually. But we have a responsibility to own that, and we have a responsibility to put ourselves into relationships where others can help us grow. That's our role in owning our faith. The fourth faith catalyst is personal ministry. Personal ministry is simply this: meeting a need. And what happens as we love God more, as we're staying in step with His Spirit, He's going to nudge us towards a need. And you can't explain it, and you can't quit thinking about it. And maybe you feel inadequate to do anything about it, but you decide to just trust anyway, and you try. And God does something amazing through just what you try to offer. And you end up trusting God more. It's those moments where you decide and where I decide to step in and to meet a need. When you choose to volunteer with preschoolers or middle schoolers, when you choose to volunteer at a soup kitchen or lead a small group, wherever you're serving, if it's on a mission trip or if it's writing letters from your living room, when you step in to meet a need, God consistently uses those moments to grow our faith. But no one can do it for me. It's something that I have to own, and it's something that you have to own. And finally, the fifth faith catalyst is this: pivotal circumstances. God uses things that happen in our lives. And here's the interesting thing about owning this last one. There's usually nothing you can do to create a pivotal circumstance, but there is something that you can intentionally do as you respond to it. Here's what I've seen over and over in my own life and in the lives of people around me. It's those pivotal circumstances. Maybe someone close to us gets sick, or maybe you lose a job unexpectedly, or a relationship ends, or maybe it's just a really difficult season. No one would choose it, but it creates in us a challenge. And if we're never challenged, then we never change. And so the challenge of pivotal circumstances is it's a moment for us to grow. Most of the time, you can't choose these circumstances, but what you can choose and what you can own is the way you respond. So instead of praying that God would remove it, you can own your faith by praying that God would use whatever pivotal circumstance you're in the middle of to help you grow your faith, to help you learn to trust God more, to help you learn to love others more. No one can do that for you. It's your responsibility. All right, that's it. Those are the 5 faith catalysts, the 5 things that God predictably and consistently uses in our lives to help us grow. And because they're predictable, you can leverage them for your own growth. Owning your faith means intentionally making the decision to step into these things that God uses. It means stepping into an environment where God can use these things. As you and I look to own the process of spiritual growth, as we begin to take on our faith as my responsibility, I want you to think, what would be your next step? Is there one of these 5 things God is trying to use in your life right now? What can you do to lean into and take ownership of that? Okay, so as a church, our strategy to help people grow spiritually is to create opportunities for people to take a step and to fully engage. But ultimately, every individual is responsible for their own spiritual growth. And the way you can own your spiritual growth is by leveraging these 5 things that God uses to grow our faith. So next time you're going to get to meet Sean Parrish and hear part of his story and the things in his life that have shaped his spiritual growth.